Technology is now up and running. We can talk, right? Good old-fashioned talk, good stories, good fishing stories. We're excited to welcome Brian Cadoret, one of our local boys who found a way to make the conservation and stewardship of Vermont his life's passion and his profession. Many of you probably know him from the ski slopes. Some of you may know him from kayaking or having him as your guide. Brian has been co-owner of stream and brook fly fishing for over 20 years and brings us a great deal of knowledge and a wealth of experiences and some phenomenal pictures, as you can see. And what more appropriate time than the last speaker of our series of 6, because all of the snow is melting. At least I have my fingers crossed. Meanwhile, my husband is skiing and has his fingers crossed that there's one more large snowstorm left in his future. So I'm going to give Brian his time because I know that you all have some questions for him, and I know he wants to get back to the slope, have that last run before the end of the season. So please join me in welcoming Brian Cadoret.
All right, so I think one of the hardest parts about agreeing to do this was slimming down the amount of photos and stuff I have and try not to be too scatterbrained, but when I put these pictures together, there was 300 and something. I think it's down to about 90, and some I just won't even say anything, just to try to go through them. They said I should go for like 45 minutes, so we'll see how that goes. I brought a couple things, some of our brochures. The business has been around since 1998. It's called Stream and Brook Fly Fishing. We guide for pretty much any kind of fish that swims in Vermont and anywhere in Vermont. We have the other co-owner, Brian Zinger, lives north of Essex. We've got guides in all over the state. So pretty much wherever you're staying, potential clients are staying, we have someone they know the area like an hour around the house really well. So I've got a t-shirt and a little fly box. We have t-shirts. I was gonna try to give one away somehow. Maybe I'll just like throw it. I didn't bring raffle tickets or anything. Got some cards. I also brought a couple visuals, some books and magazines that I was lucky enough to be in and help write. Kind of a fly box, like, you know, if I was just doing a small trout trip or a quick trip in Bristol, I might only have this. You know, this will hold quite a few flies. We can pass it around if you want. But if I'm going for pike or muskie, it's more like a briefcase. You might have multiple ones. And then, I mean, the flies are ridiculous. So some of them, like that muskie was the first one I caught that was on a fly. If you think of trout fishing, you think of dry flies. You think of throwing a little fly that stays on the surface and this trout comes up and grabs it. Well, this is like a dry fly for a pike or a muskie. This is a inch by inch block, and it stays right on the surface, and every time you pull it forward, I mean, water shoots up like a foot. After doing it for an hour, it just feels ridiculous. It feels like you're just scaring fish away. But then all of a sudden, a fish like that comes out of nowhere, rainy day, you're in a canoe or kayak just going for hours, and all of a sudden it happens when you know, 30 to 45 inch fish just eats it right off the surface. Sometimes like inches from you. So every cast, you're just looking for something exciting. And growing up around here, spin fishing for pike, a lot of the lures I used were stick baits, like rapalas that were jointed. So the flies that I'm using now are jointed. These are 2 flies put together, multiple hooks. There's weights. Some of them have weights in the middle of them, all different colors. So it's just the flies that I use. I mean, everyone in here is pretty much tied by someone I know, and they're just really fun to fish. This one just has one hook, but when you throw this 40, 60 feet away from you, let it sink down a few feet, and just slowly pull it in, or as fast as you can, either way. When you see this thing just disappear into a fish's mouth, I mean, it's just, it really does get addicting. And when I first started fly fishing for pike and bass, I mean, I thought this was like a big fly. You know, because I was going from fishing for trout, where this won't even fit in that box. But so to me, just imitating a 4 or 5 inch perch was like a big find in the beginning, because you would catch bass and decent sized pike on just something like this. But it's all changed, and with the size fly rods that we're using and the size fish that we're targeting, we're doing more like stuff like this. So it's articulated. This one has 3 different joints in it, multiple hooks. And again, when you're using something like this and a fish attacks it, it's just, even if it just follows that, we call that like a good day. So you can pass this around too. Sometimes it looks exactly like something, like maybe in the spring there's a lot of bullheads spawning around out of the Otter Creek up into farm field ditches, so you throw this in there and it looks like a bullhead kind of with the big head. But then other times, you know, you're throwing like mouse patterns, rat patterns, and that stays right on the surface and it looks like a rat coming across the water. And again, whether you're throwing this for largemouth bass or pike, when something does come up and grab it, it's unbelievable. So we can pass those around. Some of these don't have hooks at all. Some of my friends tie them with where they just leave a ring at the end and you just add a hook in when you want to fish it. So they open up their box and there's no hooks in their box. And they like that because their cat plays with them, or, you know, there's no issues. And then, you know, these flies, if you don't dry them out after, if you hit some rocks or a bridge, the hooks could break. I always carry a little hook sharpener with me. They hit rocks and just, you know, but these you can put a brand new hook on every time too. So I think that's kind of cool. So again, some are single hooks, but just it's addicting to throw these flies. So muskie, a lot of people don't really think about it, but Lake Champlain, you know, it's got rivers from New York and Vermont all the way around it. There's only 3 or 4 that I know of that have muskie. Somewhere in New York, somewhere in Vermont. And so there are muskie within a half-hour drive. You don't have to go all the way to Wisconsin or Canada, but they're really hard to find. And once you do, like, to land one is kind of a miracle. I thought I'd put some shots from downtown Middlebury. I fish year-round. Otter Creek, Lewis Creek, the Winooski. A lot of Vermont's big rivers have sections you can fish year-round. So trout season does start the second Saturday in April through Halloween, and then November, December, we do really well. Midwinter, when you're allowed to keep fishing in certain areas, you have to fish below a waterfall because otherwise the river is just totally frozen over. Like when all your buddies are ice fishing, you could still find open water that's legally you're allowed to fish, but you have to fish right below a waterfall. So like downtown Middlebury, Belden's, I mean spots like that where there's a lot of open water is where I go. That was on Christmas, that's why I'm wearing that hat. This was in some shots were in this book, Fly Fisher's Guide to New England. It covers all the states, and we guided the author a few times, and then he used a lot of our knowledge, and we got some photos in the book, which is pretty cool. That was on the Middlebury River, so not too far from here. This is the kind of a gear I basically would have the very least to go fly fishing for pike. So in the back of my car, I would have a pair of wading boots, a pair of waders, an 8 to 10 weight rod, big large arbor reel, at least, and that's a smaller box, but it's still similar, holds big flies, pair of pliers, a huge net, and then a camera with either a cell phone, or that's kind of a bamboo pole with a GoPro on the end. So I see a lot of people catch some nice fish, but they're not prepared. If you're fishing in the Otter Creek for a pike, it's possible to get them 36 to even, 46 inches long. So if you don't have, I've seen people play a fish for like 15 or 20 minutes because they just weren't ready. But every time I hook a fish like that, I expect to land it. That's my goal. You know, to me, they're trying to get away. I'm trying to land them. Someone, you know, it's going to go either way, but always try to be prepared. That's another muskie. So these are Lake Champlain fish. That's all I'm saying. It could be New York or Vermont. There's a few New York fish in here for the muskie. All the other fish are from Vermont. It's my buddy Ben. He works for Kayaking magazine. He just started doing some other stuff. He wrote this book, Kayak Fly Fishing. And I was lucky enough to be in that a bunch too. And we filmed and took photos multiple times. It's pretty cool to get out with someone from other states. You know, you get to meet a bunch of cool people doing this. Winter fishing, that's what the bank looks like a lot of times. You have to kind of, it's all ice and kind of vertical, and sometimes the water, this sounds a pointer, right?
Yeah, it does.
All right, so sometimes when this ice comes out like this, it's a few feet deep underneath here. So you have to kind of like either just jump in or slide in. And in the summertime, a lot of times you just go trout fishing, you just have one rod and you have multiple flies that you can switch over, from dry flies to multiple nymph setup with an indicator to big streamers. But in the winter, I find it easier to kind of carry two rods. One is set up with indicator, multiple flies, trying to dredge the bottom, and then one is set up with a shorter leader, maybe a sink tip, and just big streamers. So in the winter, it's easier for me to like lay a rod on the bank, fish a little while. If I want to switch, just to switch the rod. Plus they ice up, and tying all those knots when your hands are like just freezing. It's just easier to have multiple rods. That's a rod I helped design for Rock River Rods. Blood was my high school football name, 93 state champs. And it's pretty cool. My friend Nick Nair from Lincoln helped do the logo. It's kind of a pike bursting through a weed bed. And my other friend Kevin came up with that fly for me. He calls it the Lug Slayer. And that combo has landed me a lot of nice fish, which is pretty cool. That's one of the first pike I landed legit over 40 inches on a fly. And it took me probably 5 years of, when I stopped spin fishing, like kind of cold turkey, it took me at least 5 years or more before I finally started getting those big ones in the net and getting I was catching a lot of the 20 to 30, 35 inchers. And this was in November. They were making, it was cold, it was below freezing. They were making snow Killington that day. And when I caught this fish, you know, you kind of, you know, when you release the fish, you kind of go up to here in the water and you get a good release. As soon as I pulled my hands out of the water, I mean, they went totally numb. And I ended up having to paddle back with like the paddle in my arms. And like, I couldn't even like undo my pocket to like get my keys out to the truck. It was bad. But that was the first one, and it was totally worth it. I was by myself, so as soon as I got the fish in the net, I kind of paddled to the edge, jumped out, and left the water. You leave the fish in the net in the water, still with the fly in its mouth. And that GoPro could just turn it on one hand and literally just stick it in the mud. The handle in the mud, and it gets a really wide angle photo. You can put it on a mode where it takes a photo every half second for forever. So you just start taking pictures and you just take the fish out of the net, hold it up, take the fly out, and just let it go, and you just took like 75 pictures. You know, and they almost always come out better than if my buddy is taking the picture. Because he'll have his thumb in it, or his foot, or it really helps to have a low angle looking up. You know, it's always going to make the fish look a little bit bigger. You can always crop it out later. But there are a tremendous amount. I don't know what order these are going in because we switched them around. A lot of people will hire a guide service in Vermont to go trout fishing. That's what most people think of. That's our bread and butter. A high percentage of our trips are for trout. do a lot of bass and pike as well. This is just a nice kind of closing season rainbow from Dog Team, New Haven River. It's just a nice clean fish. A fun client up in Bristol. Some of these fishes are a little bit maybe distorted. That fish looks like it's pinched in, but just clients love just kind of nice afternoon, easy wading, and just getting onto nice rainbows like that. It's probably up in Bristol. In the fall around here, the brown trout and brook trout start thinking about spawning, and they get really colorful. Their bodies change a little bit, and they'll move from bigger water up looking for certain gravel and certain spawning conditions, and that's when we intercept a lot of these really big browns, is in the fall. Usually in September, October, when maybe it's one of those days where it's like 40 degrees and you get like an inch of rain. That really gets these fish moving. When everyone else is inside, that's when we're out catching fish like that. Another shot, this could be like February, just in downtown Middlebury. Maybe on the way doing some errands, just stepping out, trying to get a fish. People look at you like you're kind of crazy, especially if you're in the water, but it's kind of cool. These ice things go way out sometimes. So sometimes you can like stand in spots where you couldn't in the summer. You know, you're out on these ice things and it's just, you don't even need to be geared up. You can just be in skiing clothes. It's probably like a Thanksgiving picture, trying to get it like Thanksgiving trout. Client doing the bass. You did some bass with me one time, right?
Yeah, but you were the only one who caught one. And that was the one that you always catch when you take.
Yeah. So Lake Champlain is.
I'm sorry.
It's fine. It's really known for it's an amazing fishery. There's got to be 70, 80 different kinds of fish that live in there, from warm water to cold water. But it's really getting known on the bass circuit. I mean, there's almost every weekend it seems like there's a bass tournament on Lake Champlain. Whether it's a local club or like the pros that come from all over the country. And every spring, all of the bass go up rivers in New York and Vermont, all the way around them. They're looking for spawning habitat. So we get some really nice smallmouths. If I'm out there in my kayak for a week, I might not catch as many as that 1 week or month when they're up in the rivers. And it's really fun. You're using 4 or 5 ways, you're using trout setups, and you're getting these jumbo 16, 22-inch bass. And this guy's Tony from Connecticut. The same rivers also get steelhead runs. These are rainbows that live in Lake Champlain, and they're looking for spawning habitat. They'll come up in the midwinter, sometimes the fall, and they'll be around till May or so, and they go back into the lake. So what they're doing is they're leaving their eggs into small little brooks that as soon as those fish hatch and they're a couple inches or whatever, they shoot back into the lake. So it's a pretty good time to get these really colorful steelhead locally. And you couldn't, if you went there in August, they wouldn't be there. So you kind of have to fish winter time, this time of year, just starting. Doing a few brook trout shots. Love using these ant patterns and these foam grasshopper patterns. This is kind of an underwater shot, but that's a little stonefly, a little rubber stonefly in its mouth. Brook trout, and we're really blessed in Vermont to have so many incredible brook trout streams. I mean, pretty much if you think of any ski area in Vermont, all the way around those lifts in every direction, the whole Green Mountain National Forest. I mean, I'm sure it's written down somewhere, but it seems like there's hundreds of miles of rivers. In fact, I have a hard time going to over the gaps without stopping and taking a few casts. Like, if I'm trying to get to Boston or something, I'm going to stop like 6 times. I'm going to stop at Ripton, Hancock, Bethel Mountain Gap, 73. You know, it's tough. There's so much good water, and that's another hard part. Or hard hard decision when you're being a guide around here is someone hires you for a 4-hour trip. Like, you might have found out, okay, they want to catch a certain kind of trout or learn a new technique or something, but there's so much good water. It's hard to kind of plan where to bring them that day sometimes. You have 2 or 3 spots and that's about it. So another client, this was right at, you can tell he was really excited. Damon, he's hired us a few times, and this was like after a long day, right after dark, he wanted to take like one more cast and he catches this nice brown. That may have been kind of at Waveridge Garage, somewhere in that fast water, under Pole Mill. I also like to fish at dusk and go out to like 10, 11 o'clock at night in my kayak for largemouth bass. We really have, I mean, you could go to like Dunmore, like Champlain, Bristol Pond, Moncton Pond. There's a lot of them on Route 30, Southern Vermont. These amazing bass ponds, whether you want a tiny one that has like 1 cabin or like any of the bays on Lake Champlain. I didn't really bring any of my bass stuff, but a lot of what I'm using for bass is kind of maybe a little bit smaller than this, but just foam stuff that stays on the top, and it's all surface water eats. You're throwing baby ducks, frog patterns, all kinds of stuff on the surface. And you bring it in, and it's like using a hula popper or jitterbugs, you know, if you spin fish. And again, just the explosions and being in a kayak, this is like you're just silent out there. You can just move around and just hitting wood lines and stuff. This is another Champlain steel. Muskie, Lake Champlain muskie. And yeah, it's a pretty big fly in its mouth. I might even have that one here, I don't even know. But pretty much every, I think that was like this fly right here. So pretty much every time a fish like this shows itself, muskie are really cat and mouse. Like, you'll see them sometimes follow your fly and you're bringing it in as fast as you possibly can. Some people will put the reel under their arm and they put the rod tip in the water after a long cast, and they pull the line in with 2 hands as fast as they can. And you can't pull it too fast for these fish. As soon as you stop, they stop, and you move it and they move. Sometimes when the fly's right next to the tip of your kayak, they're still following it, and you're doing these big circles and big figure 8s with your fly rod, and your arms are getting tired. You've done it like 6 or 7 times, and they're just following it. And sometimes they just swim away, sometimes they eat right then, and when they do that, now you're standing up in the kayak, and I've broken rods trying to set the hook on them at a weird angle, but it's always just really exciting.
How much does a fish like that weigh?
I usually, if I do anything, I just do a quick measurement. I never weigh them, but people would say that was like a 43-inch muskie. That was really, I didn't do the girth, but people will say like 18 to 25 pounds, something like that. That's another one. And so I put this picture in. It's not a great picture, but you can see how the background's blotched out, right? Yeah, so one thing I've learned about being a guide and doing a lot of social media, we've got a website, Facebook, Instagram, all this stuff. And so you have to try really hard not to put a background up. You have to make sure your hand isn't like in a gill, there's no blood on the fish. Now these days you can't even have, I'm not saying you can't, but like, if you have a nice fish and it's just laying on the rocks next to your fly rod, like people really brave behind the keyboard. So I sent this to my buddy, he put it through some app on his phone, sent it back, and I was, okay, now I can post it. Because this was down in the Virgins area and you could see some stuff in the background. And so, not that I'm ultra protective, but you kind of have to. And then people will be like, well, why did you do that? So you'll get kind of grief either way. Another spring spawner I like to target is the gar. You can go for them in Lake Champlain all summer. It's really visual. A lot of times you'll see them when I'm going for bowfin in the little back bays of Lake Champlain. But in the spring, when the bass and steelhead come up, it seems like more like in May when all those fish are back in the lake, the gar start coming up. So sometimes you can sight fish a bass or a gar, and it's just really exciting. So I saw Henry in a friend's stock pond. That was one of his first fish. Again, it was a stock pond, but he gets right into it. It's pretty fun bringing him out. Just the Otter Creek is full of big fish. I was lucky enough to be included in this book called 50 Best Places Fly Fishing in the Northeast. So this covers New England and like New York, Pennsylvania, I mean all over the Northeast. And so there's 50 chapters, and I got one of the chapters and it was on fly fishing for Otter Creek pike. So the stretch between downtown Middlebury and the falls in Proctor is, I don't know, it's 30 or 40 miles in a car, but you know, with the switchbacks, I don't know how many river miles it is, but there's no dam between there. There's nothing in there. It has rivers that go into it and a lot of farm field systems that help drain their fields back in from the floods in the spring. But that stretch of water has to be in New England or the Northeast, one of the best places to get shots at fish like this. I mean, it's unbelievable. I mean, that's probably like a 43, 42 inch pike, and just the girth on it and the head on it, I mean, it's just scary fish. And if you don't have a net, if you don't have pliers, if you don't, you know, if you're using, I'm basically using a saltwater setup with fish like this. So if you do hook one, you can land it quickly and get a good release. This one was in probably early April, and I was just wearing shorts for the first time that day, and I had to scramble down that steep bank, go into the water. I mean, it was crazy. And this hat I won from the Middlebury Mountaineer as a joke. It's the size of a woman's small, baby powder blue hat. And I wore it, and I sent it to Steve the next day, and I said, I like the hat. And he's like, I can't believe you wore that. But nice fish. This is, we guide all over Killington, we guide all over the state. This guy ended up starting a business called Post Fly Box out of Massachusetts, and it's gotten really huge, but I mean, I've known him for quite a few years, and just, this is the nice falls in West Rutland. So you got Middlebury Falls all the way to Proctor, and then the next waterfall is in West Rutland, near where Route 4 hits Route 3. And then from Middlebury to Virgins, we have like 5, you know, at least, 4 or 5. So, so that's a nice stretch of water. Like I said, in the fall, you can see there's a lot of leaves in the water. That's when we get a lot of the really big browns. They are doing their spawning thing, and under a waterfall, they can't get above it. They're going upriver generally. So under a waterfall, any of the ones in the Otter Creek, or ones like a tributary that might flow into the Otter Creek, like the Neshaminy Falls in downtown Brandon, Dogteam Falls, like that's the first barrier. So if a big Otter Creek browns want to go up a river, they can't go above spots like that. So those are all prime spots to hit. Then once the season closes, in November, spots like this, everyone's either winterizing their house, doing their wood, hunting. Like they couldn't imagine going outside, you know, keep doing this type of, you know, activity. But that's usually when it's the best. We actually, we have found out that catching and releasing trout when the water temps are over 69 degrees, 70 degrees are really bad for them. You can imagine this trout just eating something, it doesn't know any better. When you set the hook on that fish and you're fighting it with your fly rod, it's trying to get away, by the time you get it in the net, it's it's used up a lot of energy, you know, that it wasn't expecting to. It's fighting for its life. So if the water is too warm, when you let those fish go, they might swim away, but the studies have said a lot of them could end up dying. I don't know the whole thing, lactic acid, all this stuff. So we carry thermometers with us, and the Otter Creek gets really warm in the summer. I mean, it'll hit 76, 78 degrees. The trouts that live there, they can make it by somehow, especially underwater. There's more water, air in the water under a waterfall, so they can make it through. But there's large parts of the summer where we don't target trout in the Otter Creek. You might have to go up into Bristol, Lincoln, Hancock, you know, to get cold water if it's kind of drought conditions and a heat wave. I mean, even in Bristol, we'll see water temps at 73. And it's something I never thought about when I was younger. And if you're keeping them, it doesn't matter. It's only if you're doing catch and release. So a lot of people know this now. So even if they see you fishing water, you know, you can get grief for it. So that's a lot of times also we're fishing pike, we're fishing bass, brook trout trips to keep people on fish and keep fishing year round. So the fishing these spots in November and December, you don't have to worry about the water temp, you're good to go. When it's really nice out in the summer, we may not be fishing spots, you know, at all because of the water temp. But we will bring people to spots like this to target fall fish and smallmouth bass, which are really fun. But I mean, I would go there tomorrow if I could. That's a great spot for trout. This is just, you know, once I finally broke through and I landed that first 40-inch pike, it seemed like by the year later I'd caught like 20. It was just something to do with the flies and getting all the gear dialed in and just putting your time in. Because when I stopped spin fishing for them, I was catching them like this routinely. Like I said, it took years. And so once in a while we'll do a trip where someone who's never fly fished a pike will catch one or two. And sometimes they'll catch one like this. Their first pike, you know, is a 39-inch pike. This is just another, you know, these big pink white flies. So they're fun to fish, but like that's the size of fish that we're trying to get. This is my personal best pike. It's 45.5 inches. I was by myself. The Otter Creek was flooding. I put in where the Middlebury River dumps in, and that had trees going down it. I mean, it was like super sketchy, but I could see the otter was really high. It was into all the grass, but it was gin clear. And so I looked at it for a while and was like, if I can just cross the Middlebury River right where it comes in, I'm fine. So I did it, and just up the bank, like my third or fourth cast, I caught this fish. And I wasn't even gonna go because I mean, it looked really sketchy to get kind of cross the flooding Middlebury River. But again, I kind of get it in the net, get over the shoreline, put the GoPro down, get a quick picture. I did get a measurement, and then released it. And but I don't even think this would be close to like the state record. You know, I mean, who knows? This could be a 22 to 25 pound fish. I don't even know. But the next day, I probably was just at Bristol Pond, throwing topwater frog patterns and lily pads, and that really is one of my favorite things. I still do a lot of trout, but these are fun to go for. It's just another gar, and I kind of put this picture in because you can see there is a background. I didn't block it out. This was years ago. I probably wouldn't even put that photo up now, even though it's not really obvious to anything, but it's just kind of the way of social media now. This was a few years ago, opening day. We have a tournament now, it's 11th year, called the Otter Creek Classic, and I got skunked in the 2-day tournament. The next day, I'm back at the golf course, and after work, I just went down to dog team or somewhere like that, I don't even know. Two casts later, I catch a 21-inch brown. This whole tournament, I mean, I fished 14 hours in a weekend, and I didn't catch anything. And then just literally a couple casts after work the next day, boom, that's the one I wanted in the tournament. And so, again, these really big fish will come up out of the Otter into its tributaries. A lot of times in winter, they'll stay there all spring, and then I would say by like June, they're all back in the Otter Creek, all the big ones. So in the fall and spring, you have really good chances of catching these really big, aggressive wild fish. So my friend Chris Rotax is a really good snowboarder. He hired his fiance gave him a trip to go for pike because he said he had seen some of the ones. And so this was his first pike ever. It was like November 5th. I told him, I said, maybe we should wait till the spring. He's like, I just got this, I want to go. All right. So we hit like 6 spots really quick. It was cold, early November. And then we were by Waybridge Garage, waiting out into that big bay. And I just see the flash behind his blind. He sets the hook, perfect. Released the fish. Immediately went to Nooney's and got lunch and decided to take a couple casts under the falls, and he catches that one right under the walking bridge, within sight of here almost. And that fly was given to me by my friend Kevin Ramirez of Vermont Fly Guys, and it didn't have a name, so now that fly is known as the Rotax, which is his last name. So some of these flies, all these flies have really funny names, and so sometimes that's how a fly gets a name, the Rotax. This is the size browns I'm looking for in October. Like I said, fishing any of the other creek tributaries. The same thing on the Winooski, the lower Mad River, the lower Dog, the lower, the Little River. Any of the stuff that has, if you have a big river that has big trout, the lower reaches of these tributaries during high water in the fall is when you're going to get these browns that are 20 to 25 inches, sometimes bigger. This one I was using like a 7-inch white fly. The river, it just looks kind of clear in this picture, but it was blown out. It was way bigger than it should have been. And so I'm just using the biggest fly I had as a pike fly. It's called the Bugs Bunny because it's a bunny. Bob ties these. It's basically what, if you tie me a white bunny fly for pike, that's what I was using. And I just see this brown come up right beside it, and it's not behind it, it's beside it. And I keep moving it, and it's almost to me. And I didn't know what to do, and it just turned its head and ate it. It set the hook, and it was literally a foot from me. And I was able to land it, again, get a quick picture, release it, and then it was in the Addison County a couple weeks ago, describing this event. It's pretty cool. So when you're fly fishing for pike, sometimes you'll catch smallmouths, huge perch, fall fish, muskie, or giant trout. I mean, this is the size of trout that are in the Otter Creek. I mean, this was my friend Brian Price, he lives in northern Vermont, and he comes down and fishes with us sometimes. And he caught this one, I mean, on just a giant fly. I mean, you know, something like this. Fly fishing for pike in Salisbury or somewhere random. And he catches like a 30-inch brown. And that was on the cover of some magazines and stuff. But that you could catch like that in downtown Middlebury. And Proctor, I mean, anywhere. It might take you 10 years, 20 years, but they're swimming, you let it go. This was one of the first fish I caught after Irene went through and ravaged all the bridges and rivers in Vermont. I was fishing in East Middlebury, and they had 3 cranes in the water, or 3 excavators in the water, and they were trying to shore up a bank, and they were just armoring the river. Everyone got really paranoid that this is my opinion, but that the river, if it happens again, it's just gonna go down 125. So they were just armoring, these guys are really good at making ditches and these machines. They were just berming everything up, which only accelerates the water in a flood, and it's gonna do more damage downriver, which since they've done that, it's gone over Route 7 and by the snowmobile bridge to Route 7, it goes over that field all the time now. I saw it a couple months ago, they had to close that road from Rock McIntyre's to Route 7. The river was, you can see, if you drive down that field today, you can see it. So it may save some houses there, but it definitely affects downriver. But anyway, I fought this fish, and I fought it down, and I had to get eye contact with the guy, and he raised this thing up, and I netted it right into his track. Because the water was still high, it fought me downriver like 20 yards into these things that were in the river. And somewhere, I didn't find the picture, but somewhere I have a picture of the thing behind me. The guy's like going like that or something. So, like I was saying, for brook trout and rainbow trout, fishing these lifelike grasshopper patterns, whether they're made of foam, deer hair, it's a really fun way to find fish. And this one I just happened to like drop, and then I don't know why a grasshopper grabbed it. So it's a real grasshopper and a fly. That was just a nice brown East Middlebury on my birthday. That's the type of fish that you could find even midsummer, but those really big ones are generally a spring and fall game. So I said we got all over the state. There's so many great spots. I mean, I think this was in the Killington area. We guide all over Vermont, and there's just limitless miles of brook trout water like this. I mean, it's really everywhere. So I tried to talk to Harper. She does some trips with us, and just thought it was a great picture. Yeah. Another client from the Killington area, kind of a little brookie down the corner. So sometimes it's hard to get great shots, especially if people don't know how to hold a fish. There are certain things you don't want to do, like a fish that's small, you kind of just want to have it in the water and you kind of hold it up and try to, whatever, but some people will hold it like that. And you're like, I'm not even taking a picture. I'm not putting that on they're squeezing it, and so it's hard to get really good pictures. As a guide, you want to try to get a good picture. We email them to them, we'll put them on river reports or whatever. This is another one. Sometimes we bring professional photographers with us on our staff to get good shots. And this is one that our friend Zach Griswold took. And Dan He and her husband Raj were the ones that started Whistle Pig. And we did a lot of fun trips with them as well. And that's out at Twin Ridges. There's a big waterfall right behind it, Twin Ridges. I wanted to mention our March Madness deal. Every winter month we are a business, but we try to come up with creative ways to give deals. So this month we do a lot of really big corporate and wedding parties. So many reasons to have a bunch of people fly fishing at once, but we're doing $200 off for a group of 5. That's just our deal this month. February was, we did one, 2 people, I forget what it was, $50. This is like Valentine's Day, so we had couples might want to do it. This is me guiding my friend do a big smallmouth. Rich Strollis, he's a really well-known fly tyer from Connecticut. And it's really a lot of fun to fish with people from all over. A couple of years ago, we had a really kind of a bad winter, and there wasn't really much snow in March. And so we were getting calls like crazy from people at Killington and Sugarbush because they were there for like it was the Christmas week. There wasn't much terrain open yet. And so you had people staying in these resorts for like a week, and they're looking for stuff to do. So I got this guy out with 5 friends. I couldn't find another guide, so I did it by myself. Usually we have 1 guide per 2 clients, that's the kind of ratio. But they were like, we don't care, we just want to go. And this kid ended up catching his biggest brownie ever caught. And it was like, I think it was like December 30th. And he was just so excited. There was a bunch of guys from New York City, and they were just really fun. This is a pike that ate one of those big rat patterns. It was even bigger than this one. That's what's hanging out of its mouth, is like a rat. And what's cool about these, like growing up for a pike, does anyone ever use like a daredevil or a big meps? So as soon as you cast one of those in the water, it's got that big treble on it. It pretty much sinks and gets hooked on a log. It's so quick. You can't stop reeling them in. In the creek with those log jams. But these flies, this will float for a little bit, and then I use sinking line to help get it down a couple inches. But I'll throw these right into log jams and rip them out, and you do like the size of a pike that will just come out of nowhere and grab them is really cool. That ended up being the same day that I caught that really big one where I said I had to cross the Middlebury to get up, and I ended up catching like 5 big pike that day. And that was just one of them. This is like a Thanksgiving brown right from downtown Middlebury. It's kind of a nice fish. Try to get out for a little bit in the morning before all the family stuff happens. Yeah, it's catch and release, but it's kind of fun to fish during the winter. I also fish northern Champlain sometimes. It's fun to go up there and hit landlocks, steelhead. There's some great spots you can do that pretty much from Ferrisburg all the way north. But again, this picture seems a little distorted, but that's a landlocked Atlantic salmon. And they're really fun to target on flies. That's also when people start trolling for them. And there's the guys like Randy, Pool World, you guys know him? They've got the icebreakers, I think is what they call it. And they troll all winter. They'll like put salt down in the bays, or not the bays, but like the ramps to get in, and they'll shovel out boat ramps, and they'll troll Lake Champlain until it freezes. And it froze this year, which was the first year in a while. This is another pretty big brown from the Middlebury, not too far from Route 7. But it was one of those days where it was just really cold and nasty, and ended up getting the 25-inch brown, something like that. And this is one of those days where most people were not inside. Wipers were on, sticks were like hitting the cars. I was driving down through the streets, and I went out anyway and ended up catching that one. My camera's all wet, that's why it's spotted up, it's pouring. This is a Merganser duck pattern my friend Pat Cohen ties from Cobblesville, New York. It's called Are You Superfly. He is really probably one of the best people that takes deer hair and he turns them into stuff like this. And the head articulates, that's a duck. If you hold it in your hand, it looks like a baby duck. And when you're throwing those out into the lily pads or whatever, and you see a bass come up and grab them, I mean, it's so much fun. But they're expensive. I mean, it takes them they're like $30 flies. But it's kind of addicting to throw flies like that. This is a nice big colored up round. That's an October fish. These big wild fish, they get kind of almost like a blue halo up in here. Just their whole side gets buttery. The top of their head gets that big kind of hump in it. Their hook jaw, form a hook jaw called a kype. I mean, the birds do the same thing when they're doing their mating thing, where the female or the male, one of them gets more colorful and they change a little bit. The big fish do the same thing. Another winter shot, I was out with a photographer, Oliver Perini from Burlington, and it's kind of fun working with, you can get a good shot on your phone, or a little digital camera, but it's cool when people go out and they're just taking all these shots. And that's Lewis Creek up off of Prison Hollow Road, and that's open year round. But again, it pretty much freezes. You have to just hit these little tiny spots, and you get to a big waterfall. It's all ice everywhere. But there's like a little bit of water at the base of it, and that's the kind of stuff we're doing in the winter. So this is Canada. So sometimes I do travel a bit. I was lucky enough to get out with my buddy Nick Mayer from Lincoln. He's an amazing artist, Nick Mayer Art, and we took our kayaks and his canoe to Canada 2 Novembers ago. It was a fairly mild November, and as soon as we hit Canada, it went down to 10 degrees for a week. And we're out there in canoes and kayaks fishing the Ottawa River, which is like Lake Champlain but moving. I can't believe how big that river is. And even the tributaries we fished were, I mean, it made the otter look like nothing, like a brook trout stream. Where Nick is in this big pike in the bottom, that's a muskie up top. It almost looks like we're on a lake. Like that's the other side of the Ottawa River. I couldn't imagine trying to kayak to it because there was so much flow, it was flooding that, I mean, you would have been miles down the river before you crossed it. Such big rivers, but that muskie on top hit this fly. That's what the other one hit. My buddy Kevin tied this like 2 days before the trip, and I ended up catching it, and it was his birthday. That was kind of cool. Lake trout. So brook trout and the river trout are a lot of fun to go for, but so in November and December we also have shots on Lake Champlain for these really big lake trout, and that is a blast. You're kind of standing on rocky points and stuff, throwing huge flies out there, letting them sink as far as you can and bringing them back quickly, and sometimes you get these big lakers to hit. It's my friend Ralph, he's a pro snowboarder, one of our guides, and it's really cool because most of the time these fish are about 100 feet deep in the big lakes. We have them in Lake Dunmore, but this was Lake Champlain, but in most of the year, that's when you see people trolling. They have a boat and they have their lures or whatever they're using 100 feet down. And so in the extreme fall, right before everything freezes up in the early winter, they go to certain areas to spawn, and that's when, as a fly angler, you can actually just stand there and cast and have a chance to get them. So that's a really marginal window, and it's usually like really nasty out. It's almost always windy out in these spots. Like waves are hitting rocks and wind over your head the whole time. You're covered in ice. It's just brutal, but it's fun. Because you could, a nice day in August, you would have no shot at that fish. It wouldn't be there. Fishing Halloween, sometimes after work, I'll get dressed up and then I'll be like, okay, I have 20 minutes before I have to be somewhere. And sometimes you get a fish. That was what I was a skeleton that year. This is a false albacore. It was one of the first ones I ever caught this year. And so sometimes I do, Vermont is actually a really small state. I think if you were out west in Colorado, you could drive 10, 12 hours in one, Montana, you could drive all day in one state. So for us to drive to Martha's Vineyard, 4 or 5 hours, that's not bad. Ottawa River, Canada, 4 or 5 hours, not bad. We fished a lot of Lake Ontario trips for steelhead, go back to like Syracuse and then head up a little bit. So not guiding out of state, but traveling out of state for a fish like this is a blast. And this was the weekend that our football team, I never wear jerseys. I hadn't worn like a baseball jersey or any jerseys, but it was the weekend that our team was introduced before a Rutland game this year. And I was in Martha's Vineyard fishing, and all my buddies were on the field to be like, you should have been here, but I sent them this picture. I wore the hat from '93, I brought it in case I caught one. And we were getting stripers, which is a lot of fun. The day before I left, I guided this guy to this fish, and he guides in northern New York, and he wanted to get a Vermont pike, so we went out, and again, a couple spots, maybe had to follow. Sometimes when they hit the flies, they just miss, but finally got one. This ended up being like a 39-inch pike. And some of these pictures seem to be, because I was still looking at my phone, a little distorted, but it was a really nice fish. The guy couldn't believe it, and I kind of snuck him in, and then the next day we went to Martha's Vineyard for a week. A lot of my friends, I showed you that realistic grasshopper fly kind of picture. Then you can also make them out of foam and any color you want, rubber legs hanging off them. sometimes like literally the size of your finger. And to me, it's really fun fishing those flies because it doesn't look like it's like you're making them eat something that doesn't live there. Like you're definitely tricking them. Doesn't look like anything that lives in Vermont. And they're still, I mean, they come up and grab it. And those flies are so buoyant, in the bend of the hook, I'll tie 20 inches of line and I'll put a streamer or an additional nymph or even 2. So you can fish 3 flies at once. You got the hopper, dropper, dropper. And it's fun to say, and it's a great way to fish too. So if a fish grabs your bottom fly, then that acts as a bobber and you see it duck under. Or if they hit that, hopefully you're paying attention. And all the time when you're guiding, someone's looking off and they have a fish on, they don't even know it. Then at the end of the, they miss a couple like that because you're like telling them to set the hook. And then, but when they're going for something a little bit bigger like that, it's usually pretty obvious. They make quite a nice splash. Kind of threw this one up to show how I get my kayak around. I just got the new, I'm on the Jackson Kayak Fishing Team, and they're made in Tennessee. And I just got a new one, which is a little bit bigger and more stable. So I might be going to a trailer this year. But we really have, it's hard as, like, I almost fish a different spot every day of the week. Like, there's so many good spots around here. And sometimes if I go to like North Ferrisburg to fish Champlain, and it's too windy there, there's so many other spots. This day I was just driving around, I found this boat launch I've never found, and got some nice bass. And there's, between Charlotte and where the Otter Creek dumps in, even just that stretch of shoreline, there's unbelievable amount of spots to just put a kayak in real quick and get a few casts in. You could be going to like Burlington to run some errands, and on the way there, the way back, a few minutes off of Route 7, get out there and paddle around a bit. I have a lot of friends who just canoe and kayak just for fun of it, and I do that too as well. I just most of the time happen to have a few fly rods in the car too. But I bring them out. And so the wild brookies that we have here they're like little paintings. Each one is just stunning. And that's, I think, in Bingo Brook, which is the White River tributary, not too far from here. Just classic ferns, a lot of moss, the dense forest everywhere. Pools that look so clear that you think you can see the fish. But a lot of the brook trout up in the mountains, literally could fit in one hand. Most of them. And sometimes you will get a 10-incher. A 12-incher is like a huge brookie when you're in water like this. But it's like spots like this where you just, after you fish it, then you maybe swim. They're good swimming pools as well. And there's spots like this all over Vermont. Nice brookies, little dry fly. That's the Osceola Wolf, one of my favorite dry flies. Once it's summertime and you can actually get out and not be all geared up, the sight fishing for bass around Champlain, around like Button Bay, Island, big ledges. You can literally, when the water's clear, so if you go, in Shoreman Bridport, the lake is almost always has bad clarity. So there's really nice fish there, but it's hard to see into the water at all. So a lot of times I do fish north of where the otter comes in, just so I can sight fish. So it's fun to see, you're just paddling along and I stand up and I have a fly rod in one hand and paddle in the other. And if I see a big fish swimming, then I can just kind of drop the paddle and get my fly down. And it's always fun to do that. And use a crayfish pattern or leash pattern, and get them down in front of these nice bass. This is from a tournament I do in northern Vermont called the Ditch Middle Classic. And what's kind of cool with the kayaks is if it's windy or if you want to stay in one spot, if it's shallow enough, I'll just like jam my paddle down. I have a little thing and it kind of holds you in place. And these are the type of shorelines that I'm looking for these nice largemouths. And I'll throw mouse patterns and stuff way up into that grass and slowly pull them through. Sometimes you'll see these big explosions and the water is only like this deep and it's totally weedy, and it can be a little difficult to get them back to actually get to land them. But it's surprising where the fish are. Like if you had a lure or a fly that just had an exposed hook and not a weed guard, like you couldn't even, you're like casting in your lawn. You wouldn't be able to get your fly back. I was working with another photographer, Austin Green. He made this awesome movie. I don't know if I can, you said that's on Wi-Fi? Maybe I could show a little bit of it. I don't know how to do it.
Although I don't know if that computer will find it, but it might.
But he came up from Tennessee and fished with us for a while, and he made a movie called Pursuing Essex. And he made a movie about pike, muskie, and pickerel. And he filmed with people all over the South, all over New England, and it was really cool to be a part of that movie. You can try to Google it. It became pretty popular. It's like 18 minutes, but the Vermont section pretty much leads it off. You could watch the first little bit and then see me in there, a bunch of my friends. I think I did my interview at Drop-In Brewing. It was pretty cool. This is another duck fly, a bigger one. That's the head, and that's a pretty big duck fly. And I caught that in the Dish Pickle Classic, which is a bass tournament in northern Vermont in the summer. That's been going on for over 10 years as well. It's Lake Champlain's premier fly fishing tournament, and it's a lot of fun. And that's just a nice largemouth bass from Champlain. Another muskie. You get this really green color sometimes. Sometimes they don't have much color at all. That fly has this huge perch pattern. You can kind of see the teeth a little bit. But those fish they're just so much fun to catch and target. Another spring bass, just using big white streamers or yellow streamers. And those pretty soon, April and May is when we'll start targeting those. I was talking about Otter Creek Classic. This doesn't have last year's winners, but this is coming up in a couple weekends, and I was able to win it the first year. There was like 11 of us, but it's over 100 people. They cap it at 120 people now. Was able to win it the pro division in 2014, but almost all these people on here are my friends, so it's a really cool. We have a 2-day tournament. We're bringing the fly fishing film tour, and it's a great time. Another muskie and Lake Champlain tributary, and I actually got into my friend's boat. He trailed right here from Connecticut. He also guides for muskie in Wisconsin, and he guides in Connecticut and Wisconsin, and it could be like the best trout fishing of the year or steelhead, and if there's within 100 miles of a musky river, he would maybe fish with you for 10 minutes and then go there. So we were doing this bass trip, and he said, I got my boat, let's go target big fish. And literally 10 minutes into the trip, I caught this fish. And that thing on my hand, I've never seen people use them too much for pike or muskie, but they're common for steelhead. You put them on your hand, and it's the tail. It's to help get your hand around the tail, and to grip them. And so he hands me that, and I put it on the wrong hand. So it's supposed to be on the tail of the fish. He always gives me grief about it, but it was also a really nice fish. The rainbows in Vermont I would show a lot of brown trout, but the rainbows in Vermont are really impressive too. This was on a pretty big white fly, articulated, probably on the New Haven River somewhere. Just really nice fish in there. The wild ones have a nice red cheek. All the fins are perfect. They're really fun to target as well. So the reason I put this photo in, and I also showed a picture with no background blocked out, and I showed one where the background wasn't blocked out. So I was fishing for bowfin on Lake Champlain by myself in my kayak, had a great day, and I just stopped on the way back, clipped off my fly, threw in a big fly, and I had my net and my pliers, but I was just fishing off the shore, and I caught this fish. It was a 47.5-inch muskie. It's the biggest one I've ever caught. Someone next to me helped net it and took the photo, and you could see a little bit in the background. I mean, it was pretty good. The guy was tall, and I was like this, but I put it up on Instagram and Facebook, and instantly there was like 100 likes and 200 likes and all these comments. But then someone said, "Hey, that's that Virgins Falls." I'm like, here we go. So I deleted it. And I sent it to my buddy, and he blotched out the whole background. just like what you would see here. Just all of this was that block. And then I put it back up, and then people were complaining that I was trying to like hide the location. So I didn't even, my buddy who's really good at, Zach Griswold, who took the photos, like a week later, he put this picture up online. And then I reposted it, and basically, you did a cut and paste and put me, in Jamaica or somewhere. Well, I got a comment saying you shouldn't bring muskie that far up in the sand in case you drop it. Because in Vermont, you can't keep muskie ever. So no one will break the state record. You can fish for them, but you have to immediately release them. You're allowed to take measurements in a photo. The biologist actually likes it if you do that, because he's kind of keep his, so people are just, like I said, they're really brave behind the keyboard. And someone really thought that there was a tropical muskie somewhere, where that looks more like bonefish water or something. This is typically what my kayak looks like as I'm about to kind of push off and go for a pike adventure. Got the paddles, I'm on the Werner paddle team. Got my little GoPro, fly rods, pliers, up here my little hook sharpener, and then a kind of fly selection, and that's about it. You can't see the net, and I always wear a life vest. But you can kind of make it as simple as you want, one box of flies, one rod, paddle and a net. That's all you really need. A lot of the guys in the Jackson kayak fishing team spin fish, and they do a lot of bass tournaments. They literally have 4 to 6 rods behind their seat, sticking up straight, and they've got fish finders, and so much stuff where it probably takes them like an hour to just get everything ready to go fishing, and literally all this stuff is just in the back of my Jeep, and I just throw the kayak on, throw this on, and like a minute later I'm paddling. But it would be really cool to see the depth and the temperatures and stuff with a fish finder, but I like to keep it pretty much as simple as possible. Working with another photographer, and for Werner paddles, they came out with this paddle that looked like a largemouth bass pattern, and so they contacted me, one of the people on their team, and they sent me a paddle like 3 months before it was supposed to go online, and within having the paddle 4 days, I had all these pictures for them, and they're using them. They're still on their website today. And that was in Mud Pond, which is in Salisbury. I was lucky enough to have a friend who knew someone where to park, and so. But that could be Bristol Pond. It could be anywhere in Vermont. I mean, there's so many great ponds. That's just one picture from that shoot, but Werner paddle used a bunch of photos because of that. This is helping Matt Dickerson with a nice pike he caught with me. He's working on a story, a do-it-yourself website, and we fish sometimes, and it's from the Addison Independent, and so he sometimes throws stuff in us about adventures that we go on in there. And that's Matt right there. This is kind of your Waybridge garage. And we were standing in waist-deep water, and this pike literally hit a foot from him. He brought the fly all the way in, and he was just taking the fly out of the water, and the fly was on the surface, and it just came up and got him. Seconds later, the fly would have been in the air, and he would have been recasting it. And so these pike are just, they're crazy. They're really crazy. They're fun to target. Another muskie. This one was kind of fun because some of my buddies were doing a float in New York, and they sent me a picture and one they had just caught, and I couldn't go with them that day. I was supposed to go with them because I had to work. So after work, I just went somewhere really close by and caught this one, and I texted it back and I said, I'm like 20 minutes behind you guys. If you just pull over and wait like 20 minutes, I'll catch up. And I sent them this picture, and they're like, whoa, really? And I think I waited like an hour, and then I said, no, I was in Vermont. I don't think they waited, but it's kind of funny. This is just kind of a general size of flies I'm using when I'm out and about for pike or muskie. Those are all tied by different friends, and I do buy flies, I barter for flies, support local shops. Sometimes I order stuff online, but not too much. But most flies I get, people just give to me, and I'm really good at getting a picture back to them, and I'll say, you know, if it was a little bit bigger and it was like olive orange instead of pink white, or I'll just throw something like that out there, and then I get a whole nother handful of flies. So I always give them feedback, but then I just change it a little bit, and so that's a pretty great. Just like returning the tux and a hat to just wear for. I caught a few fish doing that. It was at a big party where I needed a tux, and so when I brought it back, it was like wet a little bit in the bottom. I was like, I don't know how that happened. Most of the time, like I said, I'll get these big fish in the net and jump out and deal with them. This one I was able to just kind of pull out of the net and get a good shot, and the fly basically fell out, and I just released it from the kayak. But that picture has been used by a bunch of different people, which is pretty cool. This is another, this was in downtown Middlebury. I only had like 40 minutes. I put my kayak in right by the dumpster. I went up to the walking bridge and floated around the corner. Now I'm down by Marble Works and caught like a 43-inch pike. It's just, I mean, that was in downtown. You can't really tell, but that's there's people on the Happy Trail or whatever it's called, like, whoa. Just a little distorted, but like these jumbo smallmouth are so much fun. More lake trout, and so when you're in the wind and sun and there's bugs out, a lot of times you have like this buff thing, sunglasses, the hood's up. It saves a lot of sunburn and windburn and just being out in the elements. I mean, this is December on Lake Champlain. It can be brutal out there, but it's just so much fun to get lake trout. And that was one of the magazines I've read some books and magazines. I think that was Kayak Angler magazine. It's the biggest magazine for kayak anglers. It's not specific, it's mostly geared towards spin fishing. But it's cool, like somehow they got a hold of me and said, we want to interview you, submit some pictures for this article we're doing on trophy hunters, because they like to go for big fish. And so it was pretty cool to be in magazines like that. I showed my son Henry, and he's just like, yeah, whatever. I'm like, that's pretty cool, Henry. Like, this is a magazine, I'm in it, you know, it's whatever. But I don't know, I think it's pretty cool. And my parents do, my friend, like, it's pretty cool. So I'm also working on an article for them that's going to be in the spring issue on fly fishing for muskie out of kayak. So I work with magazines sometimes, which is pretty cool. When I can, I try to always mention local places to eat, places to stay. As a guide, you know, we're kind of more like a fun facilitator of like the natural resources and where to stay, where to eat, what else is going on. I'm gonna have my family here too. Can they go? You know, what, you know, is there any good live music? Where's the best wings? I mean, you really are, wherever you're staying, you have to know those questions. So if you're in Waterbury, Killington, Middlebury, and some of these books, it's really cool. This one in the chapter I did on the Pike, you got to list where to stay, where to eat. So I was able to get the Waybury Inn in here. I think my article ends like, what other river has a brewery named after it? It was on Battle Creek. And so it's really cool to like kind of promote local businesses. And at the same time, sometimes you'll see our brochures at an inn or something. And so we give them a lot of business, and then they also give us business. It is a pretty high percentage of out-of-staters who are looking to hire us, but not always, for sure. And then this was this book I was able to get in the Fly Fisher's Guide to New England. Some of those pictures I already showed. I don't think I had any bowfin in my slideshow. That's a bowfin, and it's not a great shot of it, it's so small, but they are one of my favorite fish to target. They're in Lake Champlain. Lake Champlain has a lot of fish that other lakes don't. Gar, muskie, carp, bowfin, sheephead, just so many kinds of fish to target. And if all of them have their own certain techniques you have to work out to get after them, but those are probably one of my favorite fish to catch. This is just kind of pulling the big muskie out of the net and just trying to figure out, you know, I always have at least one pair of pliers, if not two. Sometimes you have these things called jaw spreaders that opens their mouth. I mean, sometimes the fly comes out, you just put your hand on the fly and pull it out. Sometimes it's almost like you're doing surgery. And you're trying to do it while the fish is in the water, for sure. Maybe its head's up out of the water, if you have a person with you to help, because they do have these teeth that are like the size of dog teeth but sharp, and once in a while you'll get cut, or you know, so you're trying to really get them back, and you're trying to, you know, it's kind of a battle sometimes when you see it. That's all I can see of a 10-inch fly. You know, it's like I don't even know where the hook is. I have caught big fish where the hook wasn't even in their mouth. They had the fly in their mouth and they just didn't let go. I caught them all the way in, and I'm looking at the fly, and like some of these have like only one hook, you know. And I've caught fish where like they were just hanging onto this. This was just not even in their mouth. There was no hook involved, and I landed them. So you know, a lot of times I do take the barbs out of the hooks. Not always. In the Otter Creek Classic, we have to take no barbs. This is a solo mission that I did, and just was able to land this, I don't know, 43, 44-inch muskie, like totally by myself, and I just threw my GoPro down in the mud, kind of got one quick shot, you know, but it was, I think this might be my last picture. Yep. So I literally have hundreds of more pictures. But, so, does anyone have any questions?
What's a bowfin?
So a bowfin is like a prehistoric fish. Nope.
Grayling related?
More like a ling, I think. I'm not even sure. The whole top of their back has this fin, and they're an ambush predator. And if you go to Lake Champlain, in the spots like where you would never want to swim, like the cattails, that in the way back of a huge bay where it's all like grown in vegetation, maybe like hip deep or less, that's where they live. And you just see them swimming around, and you just dunk your fly down there and hope they hit it. Yes, I don't think there's many other lakes in Vermont or New England that even have them. They're really popular in the south. But like I said, they're prehistoric. They're, you know, they've been in Lake Champlain forever.
Brian, what's the goal of a guided tour? Is it the number of fish, the kinds of fish, or the weight of fish?
So each person, we individually set up each trip. We find that out. Someone might be like, okay, I live in, where I live, we have browns and rainbows stocked by the state, but we don't have any brookies. I really want to catch a brook trout. Someone might want to, they've only ever caught trout dry fly fishing, but they want to work on catching one on the streamer. Someone might want to, they've never caught a bass. They want to catch a bass. Sometimes it's like a few people and they're competitive and they have side bets, you know, like who's buying beers or who's buying lunch, you know, and so they're looking for numbers. They're looking for the amount of trout they can catch. Some people may have just moved to the area and they want to learn a few spots to hit after work. So each trip, like corporate trips, generally it's just about handing someone a fly rod who's never thought about doing it. And their company's paying for it, so they have no expectations. They're just doing it to get photos for their friends. Just look what I did today, you know. So each trip really has, that's something we have to find out, you know, what they're expecting.
Then
So,
you determine where you're going to take them?
after that, yeah.
To what part? Lake Champlain mostly, or do you go out on the street?
Mostly our trips are all walk and wade in Otter Creek tributaries, or Winooski River tributaries, or, because we guide all over Vermont. Even like I said, the other owner, his like backyard would be like fishing the Lamoille and its tributaries. So we really, it's wherever they're staying. If someone's staying at the Wayberry, we're probably not gonna fish them on the White River.
Right.
But sometimes we'll have people meet us an hour from where they're staying if they only want to catch a certain size fish. I just had someone who really wanted to do a pike fish, pike float, but they're staying in Manchester, but they're willing to meet me in Proctor. So we're gonna meet in Proctor because that's where we're gonna fish.
Do they release the fish, or do they
Yes,
take them back?
I've only had one client ever keep a fish, but and I told him, as long as you are, you have your license, so you are allowed to keep one. But most people, when they come to Vermont, they're shocked by, you can keep 12 brook trout a day. And most states are like 2 or 4. So a lot of people are shocked by how many fish you can keep and how it's just pretty much, my license allows me to fish for bass in Lake Champlain. The next day I can go to Killington to go for brook trout. The next day I could drive to Ludlow and fish the Black River. Then the next day I could, fish a pond like Goshen Dam. Like, they're really blown away like how it works, especially if they're from like Europe, where they have to pay to fish a lake that day, that one day. And they have to pay if they're gonna keep fish, whether they catch them or not. They have to pay ahead of time. And we just get a license and it's good for a year, and we can roam around and do, there's rules. You can find them online or they give you a book, but they are pretty simple compared to a lot of states, especially a lot of countries. Going to Canada, like having to figure out, okay, we're gonna be in this province, this time of year, like what license do we buy, or saltwater. When we go to Rhode Island, like a Connecticut license might work. There's really saltwater, Vermont's pretty basic, you can just do whatever.
I learned that Eisenhower used to come up to 10 minutes in Middletown Springs.
Yeah, we used to fish Furnace Brook. There's a hatchery on Furnace Brook, which is one of my favorite Otter Creek tributaries. Any other questions?
Thank you.
How necessary do you think it is to have a kayak or have a canoe or have waders? Can you have success just walking the shoreline of
Yeah, so I do, a lot of times, it is nice to just have, like I said, a couple of flies in the box, and if I'm going for brook trout, sometimes I'll just use a mesh hat as my net. I'll just scoop it up in my hat, keep it under water, and just dump it out. On a hot day, you just wear sandals, shorts that dry quick. But to go for bowfin, stuff like that, doing a lot of bass ponds, you really do need something to get out there. it's like when you're at a hike or muskie, like if you have a choice of floating from where the Middlebury River dumps in all the way to Mr. Ups, you got 4 or 5 hours to do that. That's the best way to the big pike, is to just cover a lot of water. Just stay in the river and, you know, whenever you get to the pullout, you're done fishing. But you can get lucky and just take a few casts by the Storm Cafe and catch a 40-inch pike without anything. But to routinely get them, that's when it all started clicking, when I started using these bigger flies, the kayak, had the big net, all those things helped me get a lot more big fish. But yeah, I've got some brochures out, got some cards. Again, the business is called Brook Fly Fishing. So yeah, if there's any other questions, you can email or call.
And I want to thank you from all of us. Since this is the last of our series of 6 Did You Know lectures, I want to thank you all for coming, but I'd like to also recognize the good help we've had from our assistant director, Mary Manley, who's in the back there. Members of our committee who helped put this series together, who are here: Sue Sears, our report director, Daniel Richaud, and I'm Deborah Foster, chair of the education committee. That we will be using the benefits of your donations to help expand our reach to children and expanding the upstairs opportunities for children. And we certainly thank Ryan for helping to round out.
And so, yeah, my son Henry, on Christmas time, we always come to the training.
Yeah.
He absolutely loves it, so when they said, you know, will you do this? I was like, yeah, I mean, that's what I immediately thought of. I mean, a lot of people can walk by here and it's just something, but the history of Vermont and this area is really impressive. So.
And one of the things we've discovered in our committee meetings, but we're often turning to each other and saying, did you know? And Brian was one of those did you knows because his second grade teacher is here. And when we were talking about who would come and speak, she was like, well, did you know that Brian?
Well, Sue, a couple of years ago, asked me, I went to Cornwall, if I'd go back and talk, and it was just for a classroom at first. And then I think, she's like, well, you'll actually be in the gym. And it's going to be every kid in the school. And I'm like, all right. So it's just funny that stuff works out.
What we discovered is that there's so much richness here in Addison County, and it's not the 100,000 different artifacts we have here in this museum, which happens to be one of the oldest continuously running oldest community museum in the country, but also the breadth of what we have for artifacts. So I hope most of you will come back another time and see us at our next exhibit, which is on the Dan Kiley landscape architect, who actually lived in Charlotte, Vermont, and was instrumental in putting together the St. Louis Arch, many of you know about. He was landscape architect for that. Some pieces of work that he did in Danby and private homes in Rhode Island, other places here in Vermont, and then I think it's 57th Street, or there's a couple of New York locations where he was also a landscape architect. We'll have pictures of his work here starting in May through September. And then, of course, in December, November, we start our train exhibit, so we hope you'll bring back family and friends and come see us again. Thank you very much for coming.
And if you're not on our mailing list, if you want to leave your email back here, if you want to hear